this is going to be a multi-part lesson because we're going to be making a bunch of small components that we're going to be combining together into forming a shelf, some books on that shelf, and we're going to do some books vertical and some books horizontal. And then we're also going to have some plants. And we're going to take a little bit of abstract license with the plants, and we're going to try and do a small, almost kind of bonsai style tree, and then we're going to do a small cactus. So the first thing we're going to start off with is we're going to go into elements, and we're going to work on our bookshelf. And we're just going to build the shelf part at first. And remember, we have our working and our storage section. And in our storage is everything that we built so far, and working is our work area. So it doesn't really matter so much the height and the width on this, because we are going to play with it later on. Once we get it kind of sort of how we want it, just for working purposes, and I'm just going to center this more for my own personal concerns, we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the color. And we're going to look for something in a nice woodsy color. And all your woods don't have to match. So don't sit there and freak out if you have to stop and start and Canva forgets all your colors and everything else. It really doesn't matter. As long as it looks like wood, it's going to look okay. And not all woods are the same anyways. So that's a little dark. That's a little red. Let's move this back over to the orange range. Get a little bit of sandiness in there. And that looks about right. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, great. We're going to copy this. We're going to make the uprights that will be holding on to our shelf. So here, we're going to make two of these guys. We need to space these out evenly. So we're going to use a guide. And we're just going to pick one of these two sides, and we're going to match the guide to the side. Like so. And you want to make sure that that looks about right, and it does. Then we're going to come to the other side, line it up, and then take our other little guy if we can get him. And there we go. Now these two are perfectly aligned for each other. Now this is going to be a little bit of a large shelf in our final image. So we're going to do a third one of these little Corvilles kind of right in the middle. And even though we have the line showing us where the middle of our actual shelf part is, we're still going to go ahead and check and make sure that this is all relatively even. And that's just to make sure our final adaptation looks good. That's pretty close. I'd say that's pretty much on the money. So we can get rid of our guide. And then let's go through and let's check all of our lines. And it looks pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that. So there's our shelf. If we wanted to, we could go ahead and group this. If you plan on maybe having a shelf for a couple other things, you could come over here to storage and paste it, group it, shrink it down. Not too small. This is going to be one of our smaller objects once you put it into storage. And there you have a shelf. And yet again, you can take creative license with this. You know, if you want to make it a multiple tier shelf or an angular shelf, or if you found a picture of something artistic that you really like, feel free to make it your own. But for right now, we're just going to start simple. So the next thing we need to work on is something to go on our shelves. And we are going to start off with some books. So here we're going to take a rounded rectangle and we're going to thin it up. And we're looking for something reminiscent of a book shape. And then we need to change this color to something more kind of old bookish. So we're going to go with this yellow, and then we're going to kind of fade it a little bit, add a little bit of cream to it, kind of give it that old kind of gold library book color. I kind of like that. And then we're going to come over here to our cornered square, or traditional square, whatever you like to call it. And if you've ever seen the old library books, they have those bands that run horizontally across the spine of the book. We're going to make some of those. And once we get in there, we want to zoom in, and we want to check and make sure that all those lines line up just right. And you can see right there we're a little off, so you need to come in and just try and get it as perfect as you can. And that looks pretty great. So now we're going to go ahead and back out. And we want to make this color something else, something that's going to fit the old feel. So we're going to go with blue, and then we're going to tweak that blue to kind of a more kind of faded, aged blue. I like that. That looks good. And then we're going to copy it, and we're going to put one down here. And I'm going to pull up a guide. That looks pretty good. And same on the bottom. Oop, it just won't let me grab it. There we go. So now we have those evenly spaced. We're going to add one more embellishment. And a lot of times what you'll see on library books is you'll see kind of a double bar at the top or a double bar at the bottom. It really doesn't matter which one you do. That's usually where you're going to find like the name of the book on the spine or something like that. So we're just going to thin this guy up. And I want this second line to be skinny, because in my mind, that's what I'm envisioning whenever I think of a library book. Your library books might look different. Feel free to make it look however you want. We're just going for something super traditional today. And same deal again. Try and just make that as perfect as possible. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so here we have our book. And now would be the time to place it on a shelf if we were done. And there we go, we have a book. Obviously we need more books than that. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and make this an object and group everything together. And we're going to copy. And here we have a second book. Now you can make all the books look the same if you want. I don't think that gives as good of a feel. So we're going to make some books kind of short and kind of skinny, like this guy right here. We're going to make some books kind of chunky and kind of tall, and everywhere in between. Now, one of the things you want to be conscious of whenever you're doing this is you need to try and not fit patterns. And it's going to be very tempting to come through and do something that looks like it's a pattern. And you can almost kind of see where, you know, if these went down like a staircase or something like that. So try and, you know, do your darndest to really kind of blend it up. And I'm just going to take one of these and I'm going to make it somewhere in between, trying to give it that natural feel. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we need to change all of these colors. So we're going to leave kind of our old looking gold. We're going to go to this one. We're going to go to red, and we're going to make kind of a faded red. And then this guy, we're going to go green, and we're going to make kind of a faded, kind of dark, dusty green. And let's pick another color. We want something that's going to feel old and library-esque. That orange is actually almost perfect. We're going to brown it up just a little. And then this guy, I think we're going to leave yellow. And this guy, we're going to go back and do red. Now we need to change these bands to something else. So here's where we're going to go through and we're going to ungroup. We're just going to go ahead and ungroup all of these. That way it's easier for us whenever we go to move it later on. And we can actually pull from the colors that we made if we want. You know, you could do maybe like a green here. I would tell you to be conscious. If you do have like this green next to this green, there is going to be a bleed. Same thing if you did the yellow. So just keep that in mind whenever you're kind of mixing and matching everything. And if your books don't look perfect, I don't think anybody's going to freak out too bad. But you just want them to look believable enough. And for the amount of real estate this is going to take up on our image, I wouldn't freak out too much, but just be conscious of trying to make it as good looking as you can. If you really wanted to get after this, you know, you could obviously get your color wheel out and try and pick triaddle or corresponding colors, whatever you'd like on that. But in general, that looks pretty good. So we only have two books that are similar. If you wanted, you know, you could go the extra mile and we could take like, I wouldn't necessarily want to take this purple, but maybe, you know, we could work with it and get kind of like a, you know, like a color like that. And on the bands, maybe we could just go with the gold. I don't think that looks too bad. And there we go, everything's different. So we're going to highlight all those and we're going to group those, and now that's an object. So we're going to copy that guy, we're going to come over to our storage, and we're going to paste him, we're going to shrink him down, and there's our grouping of books. So the next thing we need is we need some books on their side. So we're going to move our bookshelf over, just kind of plop him down right there. We're going to move this over, kind of plop him down right there, and we are going to ungroup. And how we build a book on its side is pretty easy. We need to go ahead and get rid of all this. I thought we were going to be able to save it, but I'm just not going to have enough room to work, and I'd rather have plenty of space to work than be sitting there fighting for space. So all we need to do now is make a square and then leave one of the sides open. So I'm going to start off, just going to get the bar right here, copying that bar, lining it up, maybe a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, maybe a little bit bigger than that. Make another copy, rotate it on its axis, and match it up. Okay, so there's kind of a rough outline. Now we need to pick a color. You can see that all of our custom colors are gone. Not a big deal. This will help add some realism if every time we're kind of making a new color. And we're going to go with something, I kind of like that dark blue. That looks good. So there we go. And now we need to make our pages, which is just going to be a square that we're going to fit inside this little pocket that we made. I'm going to zoom in to make sure those are lined up just right. Pretty good. And zoom back out, and we're going to stretch him just a little bit in. If you look at a book on its side, the hardcover, which is what we're making is a hardback book, there's a little bit of indentation for the pages, and that's for a bunch of different reasons in book binding that we're not going to go into. But it's important just to think about on your average book turned on its side how much that indentation is, and there is some variant, but in general it's a little bit but not a ton. And once we shrink this down, I think that's going to look about right. Now we need something that's going to kind of be page colored, so we're going to start off with yellow, and then we want something to kind of be almost like an eggshell, kind of like that. And, that makes it look like the pages are a little worn. So I like that. We're going to copy that again, center it up, shrink it down, and we're going to pull this guy down, and we're going to make him gray. And that is going to serve as our page line. And we're going to knock him down to about 50%. And there you go. Now we just repeat this all the way down. And on this, you don't have to be perfect. We don't really need to get a guide square out. Obviously, if you want to, you can. I may end up, just because I'm always seeking a little bit of perfection in anything that I do. We'll just kind of play with this and get it pretty close. Because once this is all shrunk down, it's going to be about this big. No one's going to be able to tell whether or not your lines are perfect unless they really zoom in on the image. We just want to make it look real. But like I said, if you wanted to, you could come all the way. Well, hold on. Let me get a square out first. And we are going to make this orange. Drop him in there. You could come all the way in. Kind of plop him down in there. And everything's looking pretty close. Not perfect, but pretty close. We can already see a couple flaws in our construction, which isn't the end of the world. And I think that's more just from shifting it around than anything else. And I'm just not going to worry about that top layer at all. So that looks pretty good to me. I think I'm satisfied with that. So we're not really going to do too much else to that. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. And we're going to group it and make a copy of it. Then we're going to come over to storage and drop them down and shrink them on up. So how this is going to be on the bookshelf is he's going to lay kind of sort of like that. You know, and what we're going to end up having is a stack of these guys, and you know they're going to be, you know, kind of, well, I'll show you here in a second. They're going to kind of be leaning a little bit. So now we need to change this color, and let's go for that green again. See if we can make that old looking green. I like that. And that looks good to me. Copy, paste, shrink them down. And yet again, you don't want all your books to be the same size, so don't freak out too much if you're sitting there saying, you know, oh my God, I can't get these all to be the same size. That's absolutely not a big deal. What's important is that they, even though they're different sizes, they look uniform and look lifelike, even though they're different. And we're going to make one more. We're going to try and recreate that old kind of goldy color. Kind of like that. Well, I want to stay away from the eggshell range because I don't want blending too much of the pages. Maybe more like that. I like that. Kind of maybe like a dull mustard. And that'll kind of give you an idea of what we're going for. And if you imagine if you walked in to like an office or a dorm room or some type of work area where they've just, you know, kind of hastily stacked up some books out of the way, you're supposed to see them standing up straight like what we have over here, all nice and relatively neat. You know, you might see them like this. And that just kind of adds a little bit of realism to it. So what we're going to do with these guys is we're going to ungroup them, then we're going to regroup them, and now that's one of our objects. We're going to shrink our shelf back down. We're going to put him back in his place. We're going to shrink our other books down a little bit just to give us some room. And there we have our books. The next thing we're going to be working on is our plants. But we're going to go ahead and pause this video because we're getting a little long. And I will see you guys in the next lecture.